Hi everyone, it's Silvia Cucina. Welcome to my channel and welcome to my new podcast, Back to Self. One of the most important aspects in the process of coming back to ourselves is to pay attention to relationships. What kind of relationships we build, what kind of relationship we have in our lives. This goes as far as your childhood experiences, but even further than that, because it goes back to the prenatal phase of your life when you were connected to your mother and where you could feel her emotions, and her mental state was very much impactful on your own being. Some people will believe that we humans are born tabula rasa. So it means with the blank slate. If I would look at the research of genetics, if I will look at the research based on generational trauma, if you would look at the research on attachment, this isn't as straightforward as that. Every one of us is already born with the self. We have some kind of personality already when we are being born, and this can be very easily observed amongst parents when they have different children, but all of them are actually different personality traits, different the way they sleep, different patterns of feeding, different preferences. So this is very common. It's very easy to observe. In attachment theory, it is very common to say that every sibling has a different parent, because every sibling, their experience of their parents is actually different. Perceptions might be changed, circumstances might be changed, different times. All of that is really part of the process of shaping our personality. Your relationship with mainly the mother and the father, because they're meant to be the main figures, and how do they respond to you? How do they build that relationship with you? As children, we hold our self-concept based on how our parents are perceiving us. The relationship between child and parent is very asymmetrical, because parent doesn't really have to love the child. It's a choice. For a child doesn't have that choice. A child, to survive, they need an adult. They need someone to love them. They need someone to look after them. And if that isn't the case, the child will at all costs try to somehow get the attention from the parent, from the love. Will try to get the love that they need. And that means very often abandoning our own selves, our own feelings, our own personality, just to get our other needs met. And that is become visible, important, and gets the attention that we really, really need to survive. Another thing with the attachment theory is that based on your relationship with your parents, your attachment is being formed. There is one secure attachment, and there's another three that is insecure. The last one is disorganized one. It's a huge interpersonal trauma. Interpersonal trauma involves trauma that is really prolonged, and it impacts and shapes your personality and your perception of the other people. Disorganized attachment really severely impacts ourselves, our viewpoint, but really it impacts our safety. Someone with disorganized attachment don't ever really felt safe emotionally, physically, psychologically. This is something that it's very unknown to them. Another form of insecure attachment is avoidant attachment, and this is very common. I see this in therapeutic room nearly every day. And this form of attachment is based on fear of being close with someone, afraid of trusting people, afraid of trusting, of getting hurt. There's a huge rejection, there's a huge abandonment wound. Our ego will try to protect you. We will try to protect ourselves from getting hurt. So we don't really get attached. We want it, but we avoid it. This is something that we would love to have. But the minute we feel someone is getting too close, someone's talking about relationships, someone is talking about something long term. So even before we finish that thought, we're actually gone. You can see how distressful or lonely places that are. Another insecure attachment is anxious attachment. And with that form of attachment, ego doesn't have enough defenses mechanism developed, doesn't have the access to it, and it's constantly in conflict between what I should be doing and what I want to be doing. And all of that is based on fear. I need to be certain ways so they won't leave me. I need to act certain ways so they will accept me. With that, all of those insecure attachments really give us a distorted view on safety, relationship, love, emotions, people, and yourself. Because based on those attachment theory, you're also feeling worthy, feeling good enough is being impacted. We all want to be loved. We all want to be seen. We do need connection. We do need connection with the other person. One of our primary needs is actually the need to belong. And we need it. We want it. But what happens when we want it, but we are actually afraid of it? Then you're living in a huge conflict. You're trying to suppress your desires. You try to suppress what you want, what you would like. You're afraid to dream because your mind, your logical mind, doesn't really cooperate, doesn't really work with your heart, with your emotions, with your body. So on one hand, your mind is telling you one thing, trying to keep you protected. And then on the other hand, you feel the whisper, but I would love to have that. So this is why you live in a huge conflict between what you want and what you think is safe. Because if there is a conflict between mind and body, there is no integration. That conflict really is impacting your well-being, your self-concept, how you perceive yourself. And this is where the disconnection happens. And it didn't happen in your adulthood. When you're in that conflict, you're constantly in the survival mode. You keep doing things just to survive. You keep doing things just to be okay, just to get another day pass by. There is no real excitement. And if there is one, it comes from external things, from doing things. When you might get a praising from your boss, when someone sees you and thanking you for the help you offered. You know, people will say, oh my God, like you did such a fantastic job there, like well done you, like well done on your promotion. So you still can get the feeling of satisfaction, comes from external things, by doing things. But we don't understand the concept of feeling worthy and feeling good enough just by being. Because in your childhood, if you have insecure attachment, there was no room for just being, because that was never enough. You always had to do something. You always had to hide even maybe some of your emotions just to please your mom. You maybe had to take her emotion and carry on for her so she could somehow feel better. Maybe you were trying to save them. Maybe you were the mediator between your parents, try to keep everything down and the conflict at minimum. Maybe you were looking after your siblings and acted like you were the parent for them rather than older sibling. Maybe you had to suppress your anger because anger was something that your parents couldn't accept. Maybe seeing you sad was too much for them. So you suppressed your sadness so you could make your parents happy. This is how we learn to disconnect from our emotions. This is when we learn the toughest lesson, probably, that our emotions are not safe, that our emotions can only bring us trouble, and our emotions are dangerous. And then, when you're so disconnected from your emotions, what do? You're in your head. You overanalyze things. You rationalize it. You try to make sense out of everything without even looking at your emotions, without even checking is that okay? Is that okay with you? Without even checking if this is what you really want. Or maybe you want something else. It's so easy to dismiss our emotions. It's so easy to say, my childhood doesn't bother me. It's in the past. I don't even think about it. I don't care about my relationship with my parents anymore. It's so easy to say that. But huge part of your history, huge part of who you are, is connected to the roots of your parents, of your grandparents, of your great-grandparents. Basically, you're not here on your own. In the realm of systematic family constellations, it is believed that we are connected and we have inside 7 generations in us. Even if it was 5, that's still a lot. Even if it was just 3, that's still a lot. To carrying on all your mom's and your dad's experiences from both sides, and their parents and their parents. So even if you would look at just 3 generations, that already is a huge amount of information, huge amount of emotional baggage. Because if you would look at yourself and your generations, how many of them did actually some kind of work around self-awareness? Majority of them, they didn't do that because for many reasons there was no room, there was no space, there was no awareness, there was no collective awareness, there was no need. Because back 100 years ago, talking actually at the times around World War I or World War II, so everyone back then, the main goal was just to survive. There was no room for emotions. And on top of that, it was all wrapped up with very rigid, very constructive religious beliefs that you couldn't even think outside of that system. Because another fear of rejection, another possibility where you could actually feel excluded, not only in the family system, but also from society, from your village, from your town. And this is huge. And you could say here, why do they not work on themselves? Why do they not help me out? Why do they now I have to be in therapy because none of them did anything? Now I have to do all this work and I'm in therapy because of them. No, my dear. If this is the case, you're not in therapy because of them. You're in therapy because you already have a different awareness than they do, and you choose to change it. You're choosing not to pass this on another generation. This is where you find the deepest strength inside you to actually heal something that your mother, your father, your grandparents, your great-grandparents didn't have courage, strength, maybe finance. They didn't have any of that. You do. And another aspect that I would like you to reconsider, you don't have to agree with me in here, but this is something to think about. That's all what I want you to do, to think about it. And based on that, you can then choose to create some of your opinions, or you choose not to create opinions and just listen and leave it like that. So whatever resonates with you. But I would like to tell you this. Your parents, regardless of what kind of experience that was that you got from them, they did the best that they could. So even if that was very difficult relationship, even if that was a very non-supportive, maybe even abusive relationship, they still did the best they could. And this has really nothing to do with you, but it has to do everything with them. Because maybe when they were looking at you, you were triggering their own wounds that they were not willing to heal, to look at, to feel. And because of that, as a result, to protect themselves, they might actually have rejected you, and that's how you perceived it. Another scenario could be when they looked at you, they realized what they didn't have. And this is where they could really realize, okay, I'm all wrapped up in my own emotions here. I don't really have time for this. I don't really have time for you. And they, rather than looking at you, maybe they were looking at their own pain. Maybe they got lost in their own pain and they were too busy with their own experiences, with their own emotions. And maybe they were distracting themselves, or maybe they found some kind of relief in different types of addictions. Maybe they were very absent parents, sometimes physically, sometimes emotionally. But this happens when they too carry a lot on themselves, but they don't really have that courage or self-awareness to go there and to listen to themselves. So if you're going to blame your parents, if you're going to blame your ancestors, it won't heal you. It won't change much, because what it does, it makes you feel like you can't do anything about it and puts you in a very hopeless position. And your well-being is then depending on their own healing process, on whether they will come to you and apologize. And by blaming, you're actually making for yourself conditions, extra conditions on your own healing process. And don't get me wrong, because sometimes you will be doing work on yourself and you will be practicing setting boundaries, your communication skills, because the relationship with your parents could be still so abusive and they don't really willing to respect your boundaries. At this point, you actually might want to, or even need to, just pull back a little bit from them and keep them at distance. Because if that is the case, you will have to also respect yourself. You will have to protect yourself as well. So have that in mind, that just because you're going to heal yourself or going through the process of healing, when people around you are not going to change, or they're not going to have the willingness to do any work or to change or to accept at least that you're changing, this is going to be really difficult to maintain those kind of relationships. And again, as a result, you might actually need to pull out a little bit and keep them at distance just to protect yourself, basically. So let's now look at the relationship that you might actually have with yourself. Because if your whole childhood you were very focused externally, you were very focused on what is going on in outside of you, what's accepted, what's expected from you, what's demanded, you don't really have time to really look at yourself. And if your parents were very critical, very demanding, you might actually have this approach towards yourself that you'll be very critical, very judgmental of yourself as well. So your inner critic will be very, very active. You will be afraid of making mistakes. There will not be kindness. You won't really pay attention how to look after yourself. You're really going to dismiss yourself, and your focus will be on how people are perceiving you. And it's the same if you felt like you were abandoned or even rejected, because often when we feel our parents has rejected us, as a result of that, we are actually going to reject ourselves as well, just to maintain some kind of loyalty, unconscious loyalty to our parents. And of course, we're going to believe that if they don't respect us, if they don't think that we are important and worthy enough, of course I can't be that good enough. And of course I'm not worthy, so of course I can't like myself. So I'm going to reject myself because I can't be that good. On the other hand, if we had very neglectful parents, if we had parents who didn't really care about us, we could do anything, whatever, and we never really got punished. There was no boundaries at home. If anything, it felt like we were maybe the parents ourselves, or we had to just do things to maintain our survival, but no one really cared. If that is the case, you might actually find yourself lacking motivations. You might actually feel like, what is the point of me trying? What's the point? Like, who would care? What's the matter? What do I matter? With neglect, we also think we don't matter. With neglect, we also think our desires, they're not really important. Again, another form of internalizing our experiences. So if we were not important for our parents, surely we're not going to be or feel like we are important for ourselves. So back to self journey is to pay attention, really pay attention to how you feel about yourself. What is your relationship with yourself? How do you treat yourself? So this is where I would encourage you to pay attention to what is that you don't like to feel. What feelings are you running away from? Very often with childhood trauma or very difficult childhood experiences, we will hold a huge shame and huge guilt in us. And if you would look at shame, what shame does to us, it frees us. It doesn't allow us to go for what we want. Shame frees our being, our existence, our dreams. It disconnects us from our heart. Shame really puts us in a very, very isolated place. And you can see how devastating that can be for our well being if one of our main primary needs is actually a sense of belonging and the need for connection. So, shame is really devastating emotion. It devastates our well being, our self concept, how we perceive ourselves. It's really difficult to live like that. And at first, you might feel, no, I don't feel shame. So, how many times you didn't do something because you were afraid of being rejected? How many times you didn't do something because you were afraid of failing? How many times you didn't do something because you were afraid of being rejected, being judged, being laughed at? How many times you kept yourself to yourself? You see, this is a form of freeze, and yes, this is trauma response. Sometimes we fight to protect ourselves, but often we also fight with ourselves. We don't allow ourselves to reconnect with our feelings. The inner critic is so active, the inner critic is so out that we don't even feel or listen. There's no way we can actually even hear that whisper of your own self saying, I don't like how you treat me. I don't like this. This is not what I want. But for you to go there, you really need to go and reconnect with yourself from the place of no judgment. When you're going to judge yourself, that part, the very vulnerable part of you, is going to feel it and what communicate with you. Another very important thing in here, we are very afraid because of our childhood. We are very afraid also of feeling disappointment. That's probably one of our biggest fears, to be in fairness. We know how hurtful it is. We know how painful it can be, the feeling of being really, really disappointed. When you had your hopes up and you hope that this time will be different, and you hope that this time, yes, what you really wanted is going to come true, and it's not going to happen. Once again, it didn't happen. So you can really feel that disappointment. When we learn that, we internalize that, you better have no hopes up. Just looking for the worst case scenario, just in case. Just be prepared for the worst case scenario. Don't have your hopes up. That's it. Why do we have that? Because deep down we are afraid of being disappointed. And majority of the time, we actually don't go for what we want is because we are afraid of feeling that disappointed again. Even if you didn't do half of the stuff that you wanted to do, aren't you going to feel disappointed regardless? So this is another perspective I really want you to feel or to understand. Logically, you feel like you're avoiding feelings, you're avoiding certain situations, you're avoiding feeling disappointed. But as a result, you're actually becoming that disappointment for yourself. You're actually living that emotion every single day. That's the paradox of emotions. And I will do a different episode on emotions itself. That's the thing, the emotions that we're most afraid of are the emotions that at the end either we become them or they're going to show up every day in your life in a different form. And until you will willing to open your eyes, open your heart, open your mind, only then you will be able to really see what is really happening inside you. And this is the process of coming back to yourself, because you really need to start connecting your mind, your thoughts with your feelings and make them work together. Not one for each other as a separate entities. No, bring them back and see what happens. Revisit your attachment, revisit your experiences in your childhood, and really be honest with yourself. What is that you want for yourself? What is that you really desire? What does your heart desire? And don't allow your mind to jump in and tell you immediately, but this is not possible. You can't do this. Step back, go with the flow, and just try to trust yourself a little bit more. Journaling about this would be amazing form of reconnecting your mind with your body. You can also message me or comment underneath the video to let me know your thoughts on it. For today, I really want to thank you for being here with me. It's been absolutely pleasure. Oh, and don't forget to subscribe.